In the early summer of 1912, the town of Villisca, Iowa, was the kind of quiet, close-knit community that defined small-town America. Just over 2,000 residents lived there, their lives shaped by the rhythm of work, church, and neighborly trust. It was a time before locked doors were common, before people thought twice about strangers passing through town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where kindness and faith wove through the streets like a gentle breeze. No one could have imagined that this tranquil town would soon become the center of one of the most horrific and baffling crimes in American history. The Moore family was well known in Villisca. Josiah Moore, known by most as Joe, was a hardworking man who owned a successful hardware store in town. He was respected and liked, a devoted husband and father. His wife, Sarah, was equally admired, active in the Presbyterian Church, and deeply involved in community events. Together they had 4 children, 11-year-old Herman, 10-year-old Catherine, 7-year-old Boyd, and 5-year-old Paul. They lived in a modest but comfortable white wooden home at 508 East 2nd Street, a home filled with laughter, prayer, and the warmth of a family that seemed to embody small-town virtue. The weekend of June 9, 1912, was special for the Moores. That Sunday evening, Sarah had organized the annual Children's Day program at their church. It was a cheerful occasion, songs, Bible recitations, and smiling faces of children proud to be part of something joyful. Many in town attended, including the Moore family and 2 young girls, Ina and Lena Stillinger, who had come from nearby to participate and later accepted an invitation to spend the night at the Moore home. That act of simple hospitality would place them at the center of a nightmare. The evening at the church stretched late into the night, wrapping up around 9:30. Families chatted as they left, carrying lanterns through the warm June air. The Moores and the Stillinger girls made their way home, walking along the quiet dirt road under the faint glow of the moon. What no one knew was that someone, perhaps someone they had seen earlier that night, perhaps a total stranger, was waiting in their home. Investigators later believed the killer entered the Moore house sometime between the time the family left for the church and when they returned home. Evidence suggested that he, or perhaps even they, had hidden in the attic, where 2 small cigarette butts were later found. Whoever it was, they had patience and intent, waiting silently in the dark as the family settled in, as the lamps were extinguished, and as one by one, the voices and footsteps below faded into sleep. The next morning, Monday, June 10th, the small routines of the neighborhood began as usual. Mary Peckham, the Moore's elderly neighbor, stepped out to hang laundry in her yard. But something felt off. The Moore house was still and silent, its shades drawn. Josiah usually started his chores early, tending to livestock and tools before breakfast, but there was no movement, no sound. As the hours passed, concern grew. Mary knocked on the door. No answer. She tried again, calling out Sarah's name, but silence hung heavy in the air. By 8 a.m., Mary had contacted Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. He arrived quickly, carrying a spare key to the front door. What awaited him inside would mark one of the darkest discoveries in Iowa's history. The house was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that feels deliberate, suffocating. The shades were drawn, the air stale. Ross stepped cautiously inside, calling out his brother's name. No response. Mary waited nervously outside. Ross moved through the house, and when he reached the first bedroom, the guest room, he froze. Inside lay the bodies of Ina and Lena Stillinger. Both girls were in bed, covered by sheets, their faces bludgeoned beyond recognition. Ross staggered back, horrified, and immediately called for help. Sheriff Hank Horton arrived soon after, followed by townspeople drawn by whispers of tragedy. When Horton entered the home, the full scale of the horror became clear. Every member of the Moore family was dead. Each had been struck multiple times in their sleep with the blunt side of an axe, Josiah's own axe, later found leaning against a wall in the guest room. Curtains were drawn tight, mirrors covered with pieces of clothing, and the killer had left behind disturbing, deliberate details. A bowl of uneaten food sat on the kitchen table, alongside a slab of bacon wrapped in cloth. A lantern had been adjusted so the flame was turned low, casting only a faint glow, and every door in the house was locked from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry, no indication of theft, and no sign that anyone had awakened or struggled. The crime had been methodical, almost ritualistic. By the time investigators began their work, word of the massacre had spread through town. Hundreds of residents gathered outside, unable to believe what they were hearing. Many entered the house themselves, trampling through rooms, disturbing what little evidence might have remained. In those early hours, the crime scene was destroyed by curiosity and chaos. The county coroner and state investigators arrived that afternoon. Their observations painted an even grimmer picture. Josiah and Sarah had been killed first in the upstairs bedroom. The children were murdered next, one by one, each while they slept. Finally, the killer descended the stairs and ended the lives of the Stillinger sisters. Blood spatter on the ceiling and walls indicated that the killer had swung the axe with great force, and yet, chillingly, not a single neighbor heard a sound. Dr. Cooper, one of the early investigators, noted that the killer seemed to have taken great care to avoid detection. Every lamp had been adjusted to cast minimal light. The axe had been wiped clean of fingerprints. The mirrors and faces were covered, a gesture that some speculated suggested guilt or shame. Others believed it was part of something ritualistic, a symbolic act by a mind unwell. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to possible suspects. The first man to draw significant suspicion was Reverend George Kelly, an English-born itinerant preacher who had attended the same church service the night of the murders. Kelly was described as eccentric, erratic, and prone to unnerving behavior. He often sent letters to women in his congregations, sometimes with unsettling undertones. Witnesses later reported that Kelly had left Villisca early the next morning on a train bound for Macedonia, Iowa, and had spoken about the murders before the news was even public. Investigators found his behavior suspicious. When questioned, his statements were inconsistent. In one version, he claimed he had heard about the murders from others at the train depot. In another, he hinted that he had seen the crime scene himself. 2 years later, under pressure from private investigators and local prosecutors, Kelly confessed to the murders in a moment of breakdown. He claimed that God had commanded him to slay the children. However, within days, he recanted the confession, stating it had been coerced after hours of intense interrogation. His trial ended in acquittal. Without solid physical evidence, the case against him evaporated. Another theory focused on Josiah Moore's former employer, Frank Jones, a wealthy and influential businessman who had once owned the store where Moore worked. The two men had a falling out after Moore opened his own hardware business, taking many of Jones's best customers with him. There were whispers of resentment, possibly even hatred. Some claimed that Jones had hired a man named William Mansfield, a known criminal, to exact revenge. Mansfield had been implicated in other axe murders across the Midwest, and Kansas, Illinois, and Colorado, all involving entire families killed as they slept. The similarities were chilling. Detective James Wilkerson, one of the investigators hired privately, believed that Mansfield was the true killer. He claimed to have gathered evidence linking him to a series of similar murders, homes entered late at night, entire families killed with the blunt side of an axe, and lamps adjusted to dim light. However, the courts found the evidence circumstantial, and Mansfield was released. To this day, some criminologists still believe the Villisca murders were part of a pattern, possibly the work of a transient serial killer moving by rail across the Midwest. But the crime scene itself raised deeper, more haunting questions. The precision and calm with which the murders were committed suggested familiarity or complete detachment. Whoever killed the Moores had the patience to wait for hours in an attic. They had the composure to move from bed to bed in total silence. They had the presence of mind to cover the mirrors and the victims' faces, to clean the weapon, to lock the doors from the inside, and to vanish without a trace. The people of Villisca were gripped by fear. 4 months after the murders, no one slept easily. Doors that had never been locked were bolted shut. Guns were kept under pillows. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. The church that had been the heart of the community became a reminder of loss. The Moore family's funerals were attended by nearly every resident in town. Black draped carriages rolled slowly through the streets as bells tolled. 8 caskets, 4 of them heartbreakingly small, were carried to the local cemetery. Reporters from across the country descended on Villisca. The case became national news, with headlines in the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and Des Moines Register. Journalists speculated wildly about motives, from religious mania to secret affairs to traveling murderers. But with no confession that held and no physical evidence, the case quickly grew cold. Over the decades that followed, the Villisca house changed owners many times. Some tried to remodel it, hoping to erase its dark history, but few stayed long. Tenants spoke of strange occurrences, footsteps in empty rooms, whispers in the night, and the faint sound of children's laughter. Some claimed they saw shadows pass through hallways where no one stood. By the late 20th century, the house had become a place of fascination for both historians and those drawn to the paranormal. Investigators studying the murders began noticing unsettling parallels with other crimes of the same era. Between 1911 and 1914, a string of unsolved axe murders had occurred in towns connected by railway lines, places like Colorado Springs, Monmouth, and Ellsworth. In many of those, entire families were murdered in their beds, the weapon left behind, faces covered, and no theft involved. It seemed Villisca was not an isolated tragedy, but part of a larger, terrifying mystery. In the 1990s, the Moore house was restored to its 1912 condition. The walls were stripped of modern paint, furnishings replaced with period-accurate replicas. It became both a museum and a memorial, offering tours to those seeking to understand what happened that night. Many visitors came out of curiosity. Some came out of respect. Others came because they wanted to feel something beyond explanation. As the decades passed, the story of Villisca never truly faded. The White House on East 2nd Street stood like a scar, unchanging, indifferent to time. Locals grew used to its presence, but few dared to go near after dark. Some said the energy there was heavy, suffocating, like stepping into a place that still remembered the screams that were never heard. Visitors to the house often describe a sudden drop in temperature when crossing the threshold, as though the air itself resists intrusion. Some feel watched, even when standing alone in the small parlor where the family once gathered to read scripture. Others report the faint scent of iron, a metallic tang that lingers without source. Skeptics have called it suggestion, the mind's way of painting fear onto old walls. But those who've spent a night inside often leave changed, speaking softly of things that reason cannot quite explain. In one well-documented case, a team of investigators spent a single night in the Moore home. Among them was a seasoned journalist who prided himself on skepticism. He expected nothing more than creaking floors and overactive imaginations. But around 2 a.m., as he sat alone in the children's room, his recorder captured something, a faint whisper, distant yet unmistakable. It sounded like a child's voice saying, "Mama." When the team reviewed the audio the next morning, none of them could explain it. There had been no children present. Others who visited described the sound of footsteps pacing in the attic, the same attic where the killer had likely waited in silence that night in 1912. The boards above creak, then go still, then creak again, as though someone shifts their weight carefully, trying not to be heard. And in the main bedroom, where Josiah and Sarah met their fate, some visitors claimed to have seen the faint outline of a man, a shadow darker than the rest of the room, standing beside the bed, unmoving. Paranormal experts have called the house one of the most active locations in America. For some, that's enough to attract curiosity. For others, it's a reason to stay far away. But to the people of Villisca, it's a reminder, not of ghosts, but of the pain left behind when justice never comes. For more than a century, the Villisca axe murders have remained unsolved. Thousands of theories have been proposed, hundreds of books written, and countless investigations reopened with new technology, but none have uncovered the truth. No fingerprints, no DNA, no conclusive motive, only fragments of a puzzle lost to time. Some believe the killer was a transient, a drifter who traveled by rail, slipping unnoticed through small towns under cover of night. Others insist it had to be someone the Moores knew, someone they trusted enough to enter their home without suspicion. Each theory raises more questions than it answers. If the killer was a stranger, how did he move through the house so quietly? If he was known to them, why did he strike with such blind brutality? In the decades following the murders, those who lived nearby spoke of the lingering unease. One neighbor, years later, told her grandchildren that sometimes, late at night, she'd wake to the sound of a train whistle in the distance, the same train that once carried the killer away. After it passed, she said, the night would grow unnaturally still, as though the town itself was holding its breath. The Moore home has since become a place of pilgrimage for both believers and doubters. Investigators, historians, ghost hunters, all have walked through its narrow halls, trying to make sense of what happened there. Some leave with evidence, others with nightmares. And yet, the house remains, its story refusing to rest. Those who've spent time there describe the sensation of being pulled back in time. The ticking of the old clock on the wall seems louder than it should be. The smell of oil lamps lingers, though none have burned in years. In the children's room, small toys left by visitors sometimes move from one corner to another overnight. In the attic, people claim to feel the press of unseen eyes, as though someone is still waiting in the dark, listening to the house breathe. One investigator, after spending a night alone inside, wrote in his journal, "It's not the house that's haunted. It's the silence." He later described hearing what sounded like quiet sobbing from the upstairs hallway. When he opened the door, there was nothing. Only the soft creak of floorboards and the heavy feeling that he was not alone. The Villisca house remains one of the most studied crime scenes in American history, not only for the mystery of who killed the Moore family and the Stillinger girls, but for what it represents, the loss of innocence, the fragility of trust, and the darkness that can hide behind ordinary walls. Modern forensic experts have revisited the case, running old evidence through new technology. Some claim that small fragments of DNA may still exist on the handle of the axe or the bedclothes, but time has a way of erasing even the sharpest truths. What's left are theories, legends, and the quiet, enduring echo of unanswered questions. In recent years, those who've entered the house for overnight stays often report a peculiar phenomenon just before dawn, the sound of footsteps descending the staircase, faint but deliberate, followed by a deep silence that seems to swallow the entire room. Some have recorded it, others say the experience is not just heard but felt, as if the air itself shifts. The owner of the property once remarked that every night feels the same, calm, then cold, then expectant. Perhaps what draws people to Villisca is not just fear, but the human need to confront what we don't understand. To stand where horror once lived and to whisper questions into the dark, hoping for a response. Because if the dead can linger, maybe they can also tell us the truth. To this day, the house remains open to visitors. Tour guides speak softly, their voices respectful. They show the bedrooms, the attic, the axe marks still faintly visible on the ceilings. Guests sometimes leave small toys, flowers, or notes near the children's beds, tokens of empathy for lives taken too soon. And while some leave with curiosity satisfied, others leave shaken, saying they felt something brush past them, something unseen but undeniably real. At night, the town of Villisca is as quiet as it was in 1912. The same wind passes through the same trees, the same train whistle echoes across the fields. And in that stillness, it's not hard to imagine the faint creak of floorboards, the swing of a lantern, and the quiet footsteps of a figure who never left. Some say the Moore family still lingers in that home, not in torment, but in waiting. Waiting for someone to finally name the person who ended their lives. Waiting for justice that never came. Waiting for peace. Over a century later, no one knows who committed the Villisca axe murders. No confession holds, no suspect fits, and no explanation feels complete. But what remains undeniable is the way this single act of horror carved itself into the history of a small Iowa town and into the fabric of America's darkest legends. When you walk past the house today, you might feel nothing at all. Or you might feel a chill that comes not from fear, but from memory, the memory of a night when the world stopped trusting its own quiet. And if you ever find yourself standing outside those white wooden walls as dusk falls and the first stars rise, you might understand what so many before you have felt, that some places never forget. Because Villisca is more than a murder scene. It's a reminder that evil can wear a familiar face, that silence can hide screams, and that even after a century, the dead can still whisper from the shadows, asking a question that has never been answered. Who came down those stairs? Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House stands not only as a piece of American history but as a haunting monument to the unknown. Tourists and investigators still walk its narrow halls, listening for answers that never come. Some leave convinced the house is alive with memory, others that it's something darker. But one question still lingers, whispering through every creak of its wooden frame, every sigh of the wind against its walls. No one knows who came down those stairs, but the house does.